Hello, my name is Joseph Allen, and this is my presentation for CSE 335, Phase 3 of the class project with Professor Balasuria. So first up is the idea I chose for my class project. My application was called Meteorite Spotting, and the main purpose of the application was to find the location of meteorites all around the world. The user would search for search for a meteorite with specific parameters such as mass, name, and year over here, and they would input it right here. And then once they search for it, they would the meteorites that match the search query would be displayed on the map with an annotation showing exactly where they are, and on the annotation there would be the name of the meteorite and also the year in which it was discovered. If they wanted to save the meteorites and view them later, there was a button that would add the meteorite to a list, which would be called Add to Favorites right here. And what this button would do is simply store the meteorite's data into the core data, and it would be stored in the table, which is on another view controller. So now, once they added it, once they've selected a meteorite from the list, so when they go to the list and they select a meteorite, they will be taken to a page where all of the meteorites and its attributes are so the meteorite's attributes on this view controller are displayed. So they can see the information for the meteorite, such as name, mass, year, and all the other things. So if one of the pieces of information is unavailable for that meteorite for whatever reason, such as mass or the year, then it'll show that the information for that parameter is unavailable. While on this page, the user can go ahead and find out exactly where the meteorite is on the map by selecting the button View on Map. So if the user wishes to view it on the map, they just click that button and they go right there. Now on the map, the meteorite they selected will be displayed only with the annotation displaying the name and the year as before. And that's pretty much the idea behind the whole project. So moving on to the next slide, it's my MVC diagram. Now I didn't make any changes to my MVC diagram. I felt like I wanted to, but in the end, there was nothing really changed. The controller would still call the NASA API, save the meteorites, and the favorites would be stored in a table view with the delete operation, and then handling the user's taps and interactions and sending favorite meteorites core data. And the model would go ahead and store all the meteorites, the data of the meteorites that were saved, and notify the controller if there was some kind of a change, and if and it would update the controller if the user had saved a new meteorite to the favorites list. And the view would pretty much just display everything that the user sees and react to their touch, filter their search options, and show the map and place marks for each of the meteorites. So this is the final class diagram that I ended up with. While it's not exactly the same diagram, it's very similar. Some of the names have been changed and a few view, like one or two view controllers have been added, but it's still pretty much the same thing. Now, what I did was instead of having a bunch of buttons, I had one picker view controller, which is denoted by these methods right here. And what it did was simply the user would select one of the options and pick the parameter that they were searching for, and that's how it would set it. So the less than, equal to, and greater than buttons were used for and those were sorry about that. Those were specifically for when the user selects mass, they would want to know the program would want to know whether they're searching for a meteorite that's equal to that mass, less than that mass, or greater than that mass. And if the user had not set one in particular, then what would happen is that it would just search for one that was equal to that mass. Now, the set max function in here is used for when the user does not know how much they want and they just want to search for the maximum number of meteorites possible. And what it would do, it would simply set the maximum number of meteorites so the user, if the user did not know for any reason, because it wouldn't really be obvious. So now if the user left either parameter blank or filled in one of the parameters incorrectly, the method would the should perform segue function would stop the user from segueing, and it would pretty much return false, so the user would not segue into the next view. So once they selected the correct parameters, then it would move on. Now, the help view controller right here is a very simple view controller. All it had was text on the screen, and it simply showed, it was simply sort of like a README, a help view controller that would simply explain the application, exactly what it was doing, and how to work with it, and how some of the parameters work and what they do. So it was very simple. All it had was just text on the screen, and the user would go there, read it if they needed some help, and then just navigate back to the main view controller after they were finished with it. That's pretty much all it did. So once the user had selected the parameters that they wanted to, and then they click search, the program would then take them to the map view controller. And the map view controller is where the meteorites were displayed on the map. So you had the map view there and the add to favorites button. And the user would be able to look at each of the maps. So when this view controller first loads, it calls the getJSON URL function, which simply figures out which parameter that the user was searching for. So if they were searching for, say, mass, it would take mass and it would create a URL based on the mass that the function mass, and also the mass that the user had supplied, and would generate a URL to get the JSON object from the API. And so once it had generated a URL, it would call the function getJSON, which would be in order to get the meteorite information pertaining to the user's queries and parse the data from the JSON object obtained from the API. Now all the results would be stored in an array of type meteorite data. So when the meteorite data is the model class, which I'll be getting to later, or no, they would be stored in meteorite search, sorry, in order to store each of the meteorites and display each of them on the map when the user wished to, and then when the user wished to add a meteorite to their favorites list, and then the meteorite was added to the core data. So that's this function right here, add to favorites. It would simply add the meteorite to the core data. Now the class meteorite data is what it would store that what it would store those files as, or the information as. It would store it as type meteorite data, so it would store all the data of the meteorite onto the core data, and this is pretty much what it would have. And this is the entity class, and so it had all the NS managed objects inside of here, for the fields rather, for the class. And now the model class, as I was talking about before, was the meteorite search class. And what this class would do it was handled creating the objects of each meteorite found during the search. This wasn't the one where it would store it in core data. This is where most of the computation for getting the names and creating the objects were done. And so this class, when it was used to retrieve the names of the meteorites and their properties when they were added to be displayed or used for other purposes. Now, the meteorite data table over here was simply the table where all of the meteorites were displayed, so the user could see them all, and they could check which ones they wanted to, and pretty much look at the meteorites there. So you had simple table view methods all in here. That's all it was. And then once the user selected a meteorite from there, it would transition to the display meteorite view controller, which would pretty much just take it would pass information to the display meteorite view controller, and then this view controller here would simply display all of the information and allow the user to look at it on the map if they needed to. The getJSON function here is simply if they wanted to view it on the map, then a JSON request would be created searching for the ID of the meteorite, and then all the parameters would be filled, and it would segue into the map view controller. Okay, moving on to, then that's pretty much the class diagram for the project. Now, the capabilities and limitations of this app. So unfortunately, the app was only able to search for up to 5 meteorites at a time. If the user attempted to set a number higher than 5, then it would manually set the number down to 5 and would not let them select more. It would not let them enter a number more than 5. So another limitation that this application had was that it was not able to search for meteorites specifically based on location. So you could not search for something in, say, Arizona or the United States. It wasn't capable of doing that. But what it was able to do is for the parameters that were available, such as year, mass, name, fall, fell, you can search for those and it will show you where they are. Based on those parameters, if the meteorites exist, it will show you where they are located on the map. Now, no matter where it is in the world, it would be able to display its location as long as it was given the longitude and latitude of the meteorite. And some of them did not have a longitude or latitude supplied. One other capability of this application is that it's able to save favorite meteorites to a favorites list and would allow the user to go back and look them up again in case there was a specific meteorite that they liked or that they wanted to, they'd be able to go back and just look at it again. And those are the capabilities and limitations. Moving on are the lessons I've learned while doing this project. And one of the best lessons I've learned during this project was how to properly implement the MVC architecture when creating a mobile application. I've started to see just how important it is to make sure that you're keeping the model and the view and the controller separate, because when they start interlapping with each other, a lot of the code gets a bit messy, and it's always better to split it up and move it into different classes and such, so it can not only look nicer but function a lot cleaner and better. Now, I also learned the importance of starting this project early in general, any project, and making sure to understand all the intricacies of the project. Now, with this one other thing is that I learned how to effectively use an API and also parse through data when there is a lot of data received. So the API was one of the biggest challenges, just figuring out exactly how it worked and how to interact with it. That was one of the biggest challenges I had during this project, and I feel like after overcoming that, it was such a great lesson. So in the future, when I have to deal with other APIs and mobile applications, I feel I've gotten quite a lot of experience in dealing with this kind of stuff. So it's a great lesson that I've learned there, and I've also learned how important it is to have class diagrams and the MVC architecture diagrams when you first create the application, so you have a general idea of exactly what you want to do and how you want to do it. And when you have those diagrams, it only makes it a lot more easier. And one of the final things I learned during this project was just how tough and rewarding a project this big can be, especially when you're working alone and not in a group of people. So you can pretty much measure your own accomplishments through the project and see just how far you've come, especially looking at earlier assignments and projects that I've done. And moving on to suggestions for the class. One suggestion I have is that there should be more emphasis on the MVC architecture when doing labs and using the MVC architecture when showing various examples. If there was more prominent, I guess, during the labs and such, it would be a lot more helpful when in developing future projects. And one other suggestion is allowing more options for the class project, like being able to use SpriteKit and making a game, or using CloudKit, or even social media interaction would be quite an interesting thing, and would also allow the possibility of even more applications. And another suggestion is when describing the process, or actually to be able to describe the process, like if we were taught how uploading an application is done on the App Store and maintaining it and updating it would be great for those who wish to continue development into the future. And one last suggestion I feel is to go over is to have like a section on security concerns in mobile applications, such as allowing users to create an account with a username and password, and then storing the passwords and the usernames and encrypting them and stuff like that. And I feel that would be quite useful and would be very helpful and very interesting topic. And yeah, that's pretty much my application. So thank you very much.